Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is losing money they couldn't afford to lose and feeling absolutely certain the next one will be different. Maybe that's you. Maybe it's been you. Maybe you've never gambled a day in your life and you're still watching this because something about the question pulled at you. That instinct, that pull, is exactly what we need to talk about. Because gambling feels like a modern problem, a Vegas problem, a download this app and get 100 free spins problem. It feels like something that came with neon lights and casino carpets specifically designed to make you lose track of time. It didn't. The urge to stake something on an uncertain outcome is so old, so deeply embedded in human behavior, that trying to find where it starts is like trying to find where a river begins. You keep going upstream and the water is still moving. You go further and it's still there. Here's what the evidence actually shows. And some of it is going to make you question whether gambling is something humans invented or something humans simply are. In 1962, archaeologists excavating a site in the Indus Valley found a collection of small carved objects made from the ankle bones of sheep and cattle. The technical name for these bones is ostrogali. You probably know them by a different name. Dice, not dice exactly, not yet, but ostrogali were the direct ancestor of every die ever rolled, every chip ever pushed across a table, every lottery ticket ever scratched. They're small, roughly cube-shaped bones with 4 distinct sides, and they fall in predictably irregular ways when thrown. Different sides came up at different frequencies, which meant different throws meant different things. The oldest astrogali ever found as deliberate gaming objects date back to roughly 40,000 years ago. Pre-agriculture, pre-pottery, pre-writing, pre-almost everything we associate with civilization. Let that land for a second. Humans were throwing bones to determine outcomes before they figured out how to grow food, before they built permanent homes, before they had a written language to record who won. They had nothing, and they were gambling with it. Here's where the conventional story breaks down. The conventional story goes like this. Humans settled into civilizations, developed trade, accumulated surplus wealth, got bored, and invented gambling as entertainment. Gambling is a product of leisure, a product of having enough. That story is clean, logical, and wrong. Because 40,000 years ago isn't even the bottom. Researchers studying primate behavior have found that our closest relatives, chimpanzees and other great apes, demonstrate what scientists call risk preference behavior. Given a choice between a guaranteed small reward and an uncertain chance at a larger one, they will consistently, repeatedly choose the gamble. Not always, but reliably enough that it shows up across multiple studies, across different populations, across different experimental designs. The neural architecture that makes gambling feel compelling, that specific cocktail of dopamine, anticipation, and near-miss excitement, didn't appear when humans built their first casino. It was already running. It came preloaded. Whatever ancestor we share with chimpanzees was already wired to prefer the uncertain larger reward over the certain smaller one. You didn't inherit a gambling problem from Vegas. You inherited it from somewhere much older and much darker than that. Back to the bones. Because astrogali don't stay mysterious for long once you follow the trail forward. By 3000 BCE, in ancient Mesopotamia, astrogali had been refined, filed smooth, weighted deliberately, marked on specific sides to create consistent numerical values. The Sumerians weren't just throwing random ankle bones and hoping. They had developed a standardized randomization system and were using it in games with rules, stakes, and outcomes that determined who got what. This is the moment gambling becomes unmistakably recognizable. Not the throwing of bones in the dark, but a structured system with agreed rules and something on the line. Mesopotamian clay tablets, some of the oldest written documents in human history, record disputes about game outcomes, legal disputes. People were taking their gambling losses to court in 3000 BCE. The bureaucracy of human disagreement had already caught up with the act of gambling before writing had been around for very long. And then there's India. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest religious texts ever written, contains an entire hymn called The Gambler's Lament, a first-person account of someone utterly destroyed by dice addiction. Read it, and you will recognize every single beat. The promises to stop, the certainty that the next game will fix everything, the watching everything fall apart and going back anyway. This was written approximately 1500 BCE. 3,500 years ago, humans were writing poetry about gambling addiction that reads like a confession post from last Tuesday. Nothing has changed. Literally nothing. Egypt went all in. Predictably, archaeologists have found board games in Egyptian tombs dating back to 3500 300 BCE. The most famous is Senet, a racing game played on a grid of 30 squares, moved by throwing sticks or astragali. It showed up in tomb paintings, buried with the dead as equipment for the afterlife. Tutankhamun was buried with multiple Senet boards because apparently you need options when you're dead for eternity. But here's what's interesting about Senet specifically. Early versions appear to be pure racing games. Later versions, the ones found in wealthier tombs with more elaborate equipment, show evidence of stakes being attached. The game evolved from recreation to wagering across centuries. It didn't start as gambling. It became gambling, because that's what humans do with every game they play long enough. Give a human a game. Wait, they will find a way to make something ride on the outcome. Rome took this to its logical extreme and then kept going past that. Romans gambled on everything. Chariot races, gladiatorial fights, dice games in the street, the outcomes of elections, the outcomes of military campaigns. Emperor Augustus famously loved gambling and played dice for money openly. Emperor Claudius wrote an entire book about dice games, which is now lost, and that is genuinely one of history's great tragedies for researchers. Rome also passed the first gambling laws in recorded history, the Lex Aleatoria, restricting gambling to specific times of year because it was becoming a public order problem. The state intervened. Sound familiar? The gap between gambling prohibition and gambling addiction is essentially 0 years. They show up simultaneously, because you cannot tell humans not to gamble without there first being a problem significant enough to legislate against. In 2019, researchers analyzing ancient Roman dice found something that should surprise nobody. The dice were loaded, faces shaved at specific angles, weight distributed unevenly, deliberately manufactured to deceive. Cheating at gambling is not a modern moral failure. It's as old as gambling itself. The moment humans put stakes on an uncertain outcome, other humans immediately started trying to uncertain it. The game and the con are twins. They always were. And the reason neither of them is going away is sitting inside your skull right now. When you gamble and win, your brain releases dopamine. When you gamble and lose, your brain releases dopamine. When you almost win, it releases more dopamine than an actual win. The system is not designed to make you satisfied. It's designed to make you keep going. This is the same loop that kept ancestors searching for food when hunts kept failing. The brain that kept chasing, kept believing the next one might work, that brain survived. The gambling industry didn't create this mechanism. It just found it and built a very expensive building around it. The lever is ancient. The machine around it is new. So here's the full picture. 40,000 years ago, humans were throwing bones before they could farm, write, or build anything permanent. By 3000 BCE, they had rules and courtroom disputes about who won. By 1500 BCE, they were writing poetry about being unable to stop. By Rome, they had laws against it and loaded dice anyway. The form changed. The feeling never did. Every time you feel your pulse jump at a near miss, every time you think this next one is genuinely going to be different, you are doing exactly what someone did 40,000 years ago, picking up a carved bone and throwing it into the dark. The bone is different now. The feeling isn't. It never was.